In the U.S. race for president, 2024 is shaping up to be a rematch of 2020, despite a flurry of legal troubles for one candidate and low approval ratings for the other. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. US President Joe Biden is fighting to reverse low poll numbers. Right now, according to a Washington Post average of 17 recent polls, Biden's approval rating stands at a record low of 38%. And Biden is trailing former President Donald Trump in polls for the general election in several key swing states. According to voters, his biggest problem is not the economy or foreign policy. Most Americans think he is too old to lead the country for another 4 years. Meanwhile, Donald Trump spent much of the year huddling with his attorneys. He was indicted on multiple criminal charges that could come to trial at critical moments during the 2024 run for the White House. Owen Fairclough has more on the Republican frontrunner.
He started 2023 as merely a twice-impeached former president embroiled in explosive revelations over hoarding classified documents and a legacy tainted by his role in the January the 6th insurrection.
This case is a fraud and it's a scam.
But Donald Trump ends the year facing trials for 91 criminal charges related to those documents and election interference, plus multiple civil trials. And yet Trump is also the Republican frontrunner for 2024's presidential election. And so far ahead in the polls, he skipped all 4 primary debates.
They're not watchable.
So as Trump's third run for the White House accelerates, it'll likely become tangled up with 4 criminal trials in New York, Washington, D.C., Florida, and Georgia. But so far, he's managed to juggle his court appearances with firing up his base in states like Iowa, whose electors hold the first nominating caucus on January the 15th.
When I'm back in office, all climate reparation payments will be canceled immediately. We're not paying reparations to other countries who have abused us on trade.
As well as a seemingly insurmountable lead in the polls, Trump's financial war chest dwarfs his rivals. But no former president running again has ever been dogged by so much legal baggage that now involves the US Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has just taken on a case that has potential implications for election interference and some of those criminal charges against Donald Trump. That Supreme Court decision isn't expected until June. Now, some legal scholars think Trump's lawyers will try to use that to put off those trials involving Trump's allegations over election interference until after November's presidential election, adding further intrigue to an unprecedented presidential campaign. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
To discuss what we can expect for 2024, let's bring in our panel. Here in Washington, D.C., Eleanor Clift is a political columnist for the Daily Beast. Adolfo Franco is an attorney and Republican strategist. Joel Rubin is a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. He joins us from Maryland. And from Miami, Jadan Horyn is Editor-in-Chief of Soigne. Well, welcome to all of you to the show. Adolfo, the former President Donald Trump, he's leading in the polls for the Republican nomination by a long way. He's got quite a big lead there. That is despite the fact that he's facing 91 felony charges. What's behind his popularity with Republicans?
Well, I think what's behind it is a few things. First of all, a growing realization by not only Republicans but other Americans, because he's doing quite well in all the national polls and in the key states, that this is a weaponization and a persecution of President Trump that's totally being weaponized. There's a fear here in the Democratic Party that the American people are going to decide who their leader is. So because they have that fear, they can't trust the American people. They've weaponized the legal system, and that's what's resonating with the American people. Remember on this program way back, Nathan King, your correspondent, when all this started in New York, that the sky had fallen in. This was going to be the end of the Trump candidacy at some point, and it's only grown. It's only manifested its growth. You did this run here as well on President Trump's challenges, and they are challenges. Obviously, every candidate has them, but you should have run a little bit on the tapes of all the Joe Biden gaffes, the Joe Biden cognitive challenges, that are going on, that Joe Biden is unable to even hold a press conference, and the fact that on every major issue, whether it's inflation, the direction of the country is going, foreign policy, immigration, Joe Biden is underwater. So you have a combination of a president that's cognitively challenged, a president whose policies and leadership is questioned by the American people, and a Republican candidate who's being persecuted. And that's why he's ahead.
Eleanor Clift, is that fair criticism against Joe Biden, the fact that he makes these gaffes? I mean, he hasn't been doing this recently. He's been doing it for a long time. He's been known for that. You know, he's doing very badly in the polls right now. Does it surprise you that Donald Trump is doing so well in the polls?
Well, I think we're still, as a country, we're in a bit of a hangover after COVID, and there is a lot of dissatisfaction and even anger in the country, and they focus it on President Biden. He's actually accomplished a great deal. The economy is doing well. Inflation has eased. He's managing U.S. involvement in two wars and keeping NATO together. But I think people are focused on their gas prices and the price of eggs, and they're not looking at the overall economy, and Biden becomes a kind of an easy target to blame for everything. And I think the war between Israel and Hamas right now, young people in particular, are siding with what they see as the underdog, and they've kind of lost sight of the atrocities that Hamas initially performed that created this war, and they're focused on the marginalized community. A year from now, a lot of these issues will look very different, and I think once the campaign is engaged, and the Democrats can make the contrast with Trump, that Biden should look better. But the country's cranky right now.
Right.
They just are.
Yeah, Eleanor, just one other point. You know, we heard Adolfo tell us this a moment ago. The former president and his supporters are framing these charges against him, as I said, 91 felony charges, as political persecution, as a political hit job. And it appears that his base agrees with him.
Yes, but it's not true. President Biden has no connection to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is independent. You have some of the local cases are brought by local prosecutors in Georgia and New York, at least the civil case there. And there is a Department of Justice suit against him for leading the insurrection on January 6th, which is entirely appropriate. If anybody is weaponizing the Department of Justice, it's Donald Trump, who's saying that if he gets elected, he will use the Justice Department to go after all the people he thinks have wronged him. So,
okay. Jadan Horyn, if we look at some of the challenges, political challenges that Donald Trump is facing right now, one candidate making some headway is Nikki Haley. She has 29% in the state of New Hampshire. That's one of the early states in the primaries. But she's still way behind Donald Trump. He has 44% in that state. But the Trump campaign appears to be worried enough to launch an advertising campaign in that state. What do you think of Nikki Haley? Can she get some kind of traction, some kind of momentum?
Well, I think she already has traction and she has momentum. I think of all people running against Donald Trump, she probably knows Donald Trump the best, and she knows his weaknesses. And they say that if someone is attacking you, then you must be a threat. So at least in that sense, the Trump campaign sees her as a threat and is taking action. But I will say this, what we are seeing in slow motion is the entire Democratic Party's martyrdom of Donald Trump. And what they fundamentally do not understand is that they are marrying Republicans, or maybe they do, and this was their intent, but they're marrying Republicans, even Republicans that don't agree with Donald Trump, to Donald Trump. But the problem is that Democrats and independents are not married to Joe Biden. And so this election is going to become one where we were taught in 2020 that the justice system is inherently unjust, and the justice system is being used now against a president, a former president, and we're supposed to suddenly believe that it's going to find justice. And yet, young people polling with old people, polling with independents, polling with Republicans who are against Donald Trump has all shown that now they're saying these seem to be political prosecutions. And they were taught and inculcated into the idea that the justice system has been weaponized and is weaponized often by those in power. Democrats are in power. This is a peril.
Yeah.
And the problem is...
Jadan, you know, we hear that very often, Jadan, that the Department of Justice is unjust. But where's the proof of that?
The proof of that is, well, first of all, the Department of Justice, it takes its orders from the President of the United States, regardless of its
well, where is the proof of that?
Independent. But let's back up a little bit. We have Tish James in New York, who actually campaigned on getting Donald Trump. She has multiple quotes, including now in the court cases, talking about and saying he's an illegitimate president. We have the Democratic Party writ large. Yes, the president himself is not saying anything. But winking and nodding from the Democratic establishment, from where these are coming from. Give me a Republican that is prosecuting Donald Trump outside of ones that are his enemies. If he truly did things that everyone across the board believes is wrong, then people would. Look at what happened with George Santos. Republicans and Democrats got together and got rid of someone they believed was entirely unethical. There was no political prosecution there. There was a true belief that that person needed to go. So, you know, I will say that when we are looking at 2024, this is entirely from and originated with a strategy of saying that if we married Republicans to Donald Trump, then Donald Trump would lose. But the problem with the poison is it can also poison you.
Right.
You want to,
Joel, one moment, Adolfo. I'll get to you in a moment, Adolfo. I want to get to Joel. Joel, lots to address there. Firstly, you know, we just heard Jadan tell us. We just heard Jadan tell us that the Department of Justice is unjust and that these prosecutions against Donald Trump are actually motivated by politics and that they are backfiring.
Well, where to start? I mean, first of all, Democrats, we have no say in who Donald Trump marries. He's married multiple women over his lifetime, and the Republican Party has proposed to him and is begging for that ring as well. Look at the House. The MAGA House essentially is Donald Trump's playground, and he has weaponized the Judiciary Committee to try to go after Joe Biden, to try to create confusion in the public eye. Let there be no doubt. These indictments are because crimes were committed. They are indictments that are legitimate in the rule of law. They are not some conspiracy by the Justice Department to create fraudulent crimes. You know, Donald Trump has been engaging in criminal activity for many years, and it's caught up with him. Just ask Chris Christie, a Republican opponent of his, on the stage, who makes these claims. I'm not alone. This is not crazy. This is Republican leadership saying that as well. So I think Donald Trump, though, and just to make sure that we're clear on this, Donald Trump is afraid of answering. He's cowardly. He's afraid of going in front of the public in a debate forum with Chris Christie and answering any questions. You know, when you're corrupt and you're cowardly and you're a criminal, it's a really bad combination to have as a platform.
Yeah, Joel, I want to get to some of the challenges facing Joe Biden right now. He's not doing well in the polls, as we've seen. His national approval rating has dropped to 38%. That's that average of 17 polls that was cited by the Washington Post. You know, the thing is, does he have some kind of a messaging problem? As Eleanor told us a few minutes ago, the economy is doing relatively well. Inflation is going down. It's going in the right direction. A recession has been avoided in the country. And if we listen to the Federal Reserve Chairman, he told us not so long ago that he expects there to be 3 rate cuts in the coming year. So what's the disconnect here? Why isn't Joe Biden able to sell that?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm with Eleanor on this one. I mean, in recent polling, Mitch McConnell got a 6% approval rating, 6%. Incumbents in power right now are not popular across the board. But what Joe Biden is engaging in right now is governing. And the party that is not running the race for president, meaning the Democratic Party in this case, sort of an incumbent is already in and set up to be the nominee. This is the party that usually performs lower in the polls compared to the other side. But even in some polls amongst likely voters, Biden is up by 2. I think there's always going to be a messaging question about ensuring that all these significant accomplishments are communicated effectively to the voters, and they will be. But there is no incumbent leader in this country that's popular right now.
Okay, Adolfo, I know you want to respond to all of that. Go ahead.
Well, it's a lot to respond to when you have 3 guests here. Now, a couple of things. Let me start with good to see my good friend Joel on here. It's always a nice spin, and I always enjoy it, Joel. Let me say a couple of things about this. You're at 34%. In some polls, you got a lot to worry about. When you're underwater with the key constituencies that were supporting you, you have a lot to worry about. You know, in this program, with one of the guests here was referring, well, you know, it's a year out and everybody is behind at this time. Well, you know, a little fact check here. Go back to 1943. At this time since 1943, only 2 presidents have been underwater at this time before the election. They were Donald Trump in 2020 and Joe Biden now. I should say in 2019. So
who won in 2020, Adolfo?
Well, just a minute. I didn't interrupt you. It doesn't. So that's the first thing, Joel. You got to take into account. This is not a messaging problem.
But
I think Eleanor is right. There's a problem here, though, Eleanor. When you said the problem is the American people are looking at the price of gasoline and eggs. Well, you know, everybody on this set is part of the elites. If you're paying the gasoline prices, which are still 25% higher than when President Trump became president, inflation is down. Yes, after it skyrocketed to 45-year highs, and then it came down, and it's still higher. So people are feeling it, and that's why the numbers don't lie. What this panel wants to do is, you just can't believe your lying eyes at the grocery stores that prices are higher. The fact of the matter is, no. Presidents are not faring at these numbers. These are historic numbers. He's getting down to the levels President Nixon was. Now, you asked a question in this program, and I want to answer it, about the justice system in this country. Yes, the Justice Department has been weaponized, and it's been weaponized. Here's the evidence. It slow-walked and let statutes expire on the president's son. It took a Delaware Trump appointee judge to set a scandalous deal plea aside, and to say with a straight face of someone of the caliber of Eleanor Clift that the Justice Department is independent. Really? I didn't hear that when Bill Barr was Attorney General of the United States, and now he's one of your favorites because he's criticized on occasion President Trump. So you can't have it both ways. Of course, Merrick Garland is protecting the president. And of course, Merrick Garland is a political appointee.
Okay, Adolfo, I've got to give...
No.
I've got to give Eleanor a chance to respond to that. Eleanor, go ahead. I mean, just one point I want to make. You know, Adolfo was saying that one of the prosecutors in Delaware let the president's son go. Yes, that did happen initially, but the president's son is now facing some serious charges.
Right.
After a Trump judge intervened.
Okay, let Eleanor go with this. Eleanor?
If the Justice Department were taking orders from the White House and from Joe Biden, there would not be an indictment brought against his son. That's for starters. And if I didn't say that the Department of Justice was independent during the Trump administration, it's because it wasn't. And Attorney General Barr did a lot of things that Trump wanted, and then he saw the light towards the end of, and he resigned before the end of the term, and has been quite spoken out about what Donald Trump wanted to do that was illegal. So I rest my case.
Okay, Jadan, I want to move on to one other issue that's having a bit of an impact on the election, and that is the two major conflicts right now, the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the Israel-Gaza conflict. On the Gaza crisis itself, the New York Times Siena College poll shows that 57% of voters disapprove of President Biden's handling of that crisis. And as Eleanor told us a moment ago, he's not doing well among young voters at all. And we look at the Ukraine crisis, the president's hope to get more funding for Ukraine is not working. Congress won't pass the bill to give them more money. Will these conflicts impact the outcome of the election?
I think there's a good possibility. I will argue that probably Joel and I would agree that President Biden has been very, very strong and a pro-Israel advocate in a way that at least I am a bit shocked by. Joel probably won't be. He knows Biden's kind of heart a little better than I do. But I can say this much. Sometimes you cannot respond to the whims of voters. You have to decide and do what is right. In this case, young people are clearly wrong. Supporting Hamas, supporting mass murder because they're the underdog or some kind of contrived rhetoric is just simply wrong. And the president is right on standing this. And if he loses re-election because of Israel, it's certainly not going to be any different under President Trump or these young people that support Hamas. So in that sense, we can just kind of disabuse Americans' notion that somehow under either administration, we're going to have a less pro-Israel policy. When it comes to Ukraine, I think there's a real threat to our allies and ultimately to the United States itself with a resurgent and revanchist Russia. And I think, the saber rattling that's happening now in South America, with Venezuela attempting to seize parts of Guyana, I think the American people are looking at the international realm and saying that under President Biden, that the U.S. appears to be weaker. And that's ironic because we were told that we were weaker under Trump, but it didn't feel that way. We're told that we're stronger under Biden, but it doesn't seem that. So, there is that kind of inverse dichotomy going on, and it is likely to affect the outcome of how people vote.
Joel, you have previously served as a senior diplomat in the United States State Department. I mean, do you see a way for the president to address what he says are important national security issues, while at the same time, really, not putting his own domestic political issues in peril?
Yeah, look, I agree a lot with Jaden's analysis here. And I'll say one of the axioms of foreign policy is that we don't control the world. Shocking, isn't it, right? But events happen. And events have now happened with Russia and with Hamas brutally invading their neighbors and killing civilians. And we know the story there. And Joe Biden has responded. What he needs to do is to explain, and he has been, but continue to explain why this is in America's long-term security interests as well as in the interests of our friends and allies right now. He's getting kneecapped, though, and I think it has to be said. He's getting kneecapped right now by the House Republicans who are blocking funding for a national security supplemental that would provide aid to Israel and Ukraine and to the Palestinian people. That is crucial aid. And rather than taking a vote on these opportunities to show American leadership, House Republicans are trying to extort Democrats when they don't have the votes to make some policy changes on immigration. That's unseemly. And I think that that's where the president, he has a real problem here at home domestically, but it's not from the Democratic base. It's from the Republican Party taking its orders from Donald Trump, who does not want him to be a successful foreign policy president.
All right, Adolfo, you heard it there. The big reason that the Republicans are not voting money for these conflicts, for Israel in one instance, for Ukraine in the other, is the big I word, immigration. That is a huge issue for voters in the upcoming election. Donald Trump's solution to the border crisis is to embark, in his own words, on the largest deportation operation in history. He's been using some pretty tough language. He accuses migrants of, quote, poisoning the blood of our country. A lot of the people who are coming up to the border are seeking asylum, and there are laws in the United States that protect those people when they seek asylum. I mean, how does a former president hope to deport people in such large numbers?
Well, it's a fantasy to believe that the vast majority of these millions and millions of people that are now in record numbers crossing over our border for political asylum cases, they're either manipulating the political asylum system or they're here for as economic refugees, which is the vast majority. Vast majority of asylum cases are denied, and the vast majority of these people are either illegally or unprocessed. We don't even know who's in the country. We have several hundred Chinese agents that we know are in the country. We have a border that is not under control. The former Obama administration director of immigration said there was a crisis if you had 1,000 and out of control if you had 4,000 people crossing over a day. Now we have over 10,000. So it is an absolute crisis, and it has to be handled. It was President Biden who introduced the border negotiations into the supplemental assistance for Israel and Ukraine. It was President Biden that got himself into this pickle. So for my friend Joel, it was his doing. Problem is when somebody like Joel says he's not dividing the Democratic base, are you kidding me? You look at the numbers and the far left, particularly among you people, of course the Democratic left is completely divided. I disagree with our guest that he has been firm on these matters. I think he's put enormous pressure unnecessarily on Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think he's in that regard a very weak leader. With the situation in Yemen, he has not responded adequately. Those missile launchers in Yemen should be taken out that are taking hostage ships. And he's certainly demonstrated throughout the world that the American leadership is under retreat. So you can't control the world,
if anything,
but you can certainly exert leadership, and you can certainly exert leadership.
If Donald Trump were president, Russia would already have to
One moment, Joel, I'll get to you.
Donald Trump was president of the United States, we did not have these crises. When Donald Trump was president, we had low inflation and we had peace.
All right.
And that has been a disaster in the last 4 years. And
all right, Joel, go ahead with your response.
The other night that Donald Trump lauded Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin and called them heroes and role models for his presidency. You've got to be kidding me, Adolfo. If Donald Trump were president right now, Vladimir Putin would have already been on the borders of NATO countries and beyond. He would have been through Ukraine. And the reality is that Donald Trump is asking his MAGA allies in the House to do the bidding, and they are doing the bidding. They are preventing American national security from being successful.
Talking about reality.
I want to get.
The reality is under two Democrat presidents, there were invasions of Ukraine. Under President Obama in Crimea in 2014, and under this president. So when we have Democrats in power, we have a clear signal to the world. America's not going to act.
Okay.
The fact of the matter is, while Donald Trump is
language.
Right. I want to get back to Eleanor. Eleanor, I just want to talk a little bit more about the immigration issue and how big an issue it will be in the upcoming election. And even on this issue, President Biden is not doing very well. There was a Harvard-Harris poll that came out just a day ago, which says that only 38% of voters approve of the manner in which he's handling the immigration crisis on the southern border. What kind of jeopardy is he facing on this issue?
Well, first of all, I remain hopeful that there will be a deal in Congress to provide, in exchange for some concessions at the border, there will be a deal to provide much needed aid to Israel and to Ukraine and also for the Palestinian people. So that's in the works. Secondly, the border has been in crisis mode for decades. The last legislation was 1986. And Trump the former president has said repeatedly that they're coming, the hordes are coming, the caravans are coming. That was his big shtick in 2018, and the Democrats still regained control of the House. It was his pitch in 2020, and he lost the election. He's ginning it up again that we're in this terrible state of crisis, and I don't think it's going to work. So he's going to keep trying to scare people. Chinese are coming in. Iranians are coming in, and the Fed, which just revealed all the latest numbers on the economy, said the economy is good in large part because immigration is up. We need immigrants.
Okay, we are going to have to leave it there. Time has caught up with us. Thank you to all of you for being with us on the show. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.